The Prometheus lab sat hidden beneath the Nevada desert, a testament to humanity's insatiable curiosity and ambition. A complex network of tunnels and chambers. It housed some of the most advanced scientific equipment on the planet. The lab's existence was known only to a select few: government officials, military personnel, and the brilliant minds who worked there. Dr. Lahman stood in the elevator, descending deeper underground than she had ever been before. At 34, she was one of the youngest division heads in the World Peace Research Alliance, with a reputation for innovative mechanical engineering solutions and groundbreaking quantum energy research. Her black hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and her dark eyes reflected the blue glow of her security badge as the elevator continued its journey downward. Today marked her first day as supervisor of Project Threshold, a classified initiative she knew almost nothing about. The promotion had come suddenly, following the unexpected resignation of her predecessor, Dr. Nguyen. The official statement cited personal reasons, but rumors suggested otherwise. Some whispered about mental breakdowns, others about ethical disagreements with the project's direction, and checked her watch. 7:15 a.m. Early, but she wanted to familiarize herself with the facility before the rest of the team arrived. The elevator finally stopped, doors sliding open to reveal a pristine white corridor. A security guard nodded at her from his station. "Good morning, Dr. Lamb. We've been expecting you," and returned the greeting with a polite smile. "Thank you. I'm looking forward to getting started." The guard scanned her badge, then his own, before pressing his palm against a biometric reader. "Director Joe asked me to escort you to the main control room. She's waiting for you there." As they walked through the corridor and noted the extreme security measures, cameras tracking their every move, doors requiring multiple verification methods, and the subtle hum of what she suspected were electromagnetic field generators designed to prevent unauthorized electronic transmissions. "Quite the setup," she remarked. The guard nodded. "Nothing gets in or out without authorization. The quantum experiments conducted here are sensitive." They passed several laboratories with glass walls, revealing glimpses of sophisticated equipment. Scientists in white lab coats moved about, absorbed in their work, and recognized some of the technology: quantum computing arrays, particle accelerators, and what appeared to be a prototype zero-point energy extractor. Director Joe waited at the end of the corridor. A tall woman with silver-streaked hair and the posture of someone who commanded respect. She extended her hand as An approached. "Dr. Lamb, welcome to Prometheus. I trust your relocation went smoothly?" "Yes, thank you, Director, though I'm still unpacking." Joe gestured toward a massive door at the end of the hallway. "Let's not waste time. There's much to cover, and I have a meeting with the Alliance Board in 2 hours." The control room beyond the door was a testament to human ingenuity. Curved screens displayed data streams. 3D projections of quantum fields hovered in the air, and a transparent central console pulsed with blue light. But what immediately caught An's attention was a single red button encased in clear protective glass at the center of the main control panel. "That's..." An began, pointing to the button. "The quantum trigger." Joe finished. "The culmination of 30 years of research. It initiates our primary experiment, but it's never been activated outside of simulations." Her voice carried a warning. "And it won't be until we're absolutely certain of the outcome." And approached the console, studying the various instruments and displays. "What exactly are we attempting to achieve here, Director?" My briefing was vague. Joe's expression remained neutral. Project Threshold is exploring the practical applications of quantum bridging, creating stable connections between points in space-time. The theoretical implications for energy production, transportation, and communication are revolutionary and dangerous. And added, precisely why we needed someone with your background. Your paper on quantum containment fields impressed the board. Joe, Naomo handed on a tablet. Your security clearance has been updated. This contains everything you need to know about the project. I suggest you start with the safety protocols, and accepted the tablet, but her eyes were drawn back to the red button. Has anyone ever been tempted to press it, just to see what happens? Joe's expression hardened. Dr. Lamb, this isn't a toy. That button initiates a sequence that could potentially alter the fabric of reality. The glass case isn't just for show. It requires 3 separate authorization codes to open. Mine, yours, and the system AI's. A failsafe we implemented after an incident last year. Incident? Anne asked. Your predecessor became obsessed with the theoretical output. Started working alone at night, running unsanctioned simulations. Jo lowered her voice. We found him one morning, attempting to bypass the security protocols. He was not himself, and felt a chill despite the temperature-controlled environment. I understand. Good. Jo checked her watch. Your team will arrive at 9 o'clock. I suggest you use the time to review the materials. Your office is through that door. She pointed to a glass-walled room adjacent to the control center. Any questions before I leave you to it? Anne had hundreds, but she simply shook her head. Not yet. I'll read through everything first. Wise choice. Jo turned to leave, but paused. One more thing. Dr. Lamb, trust is a luxury we can't afford here. Verify everything, even if it comes from me. With that cryptic warning, she exited the control room, leaving Anne alone with the softly humming machines, and made her way to the office, settling into the ergonomic chair behind the desk. The tablet required her fingerprint and retinal scan before unlocking, revealing thousands of files organized by security clearance level. She began with the personnel files, wanting to know who she'd be working with. Dr. Min Tuan, psychology specialist, background in cognitive neurophysics, responsible for monitoring mental health effects of quantum exposure. Elena Zhao, AI programmer, specialized in quantum algorithm optimization, primary developer of the facility's artificial intelligence system. Captain Hung, military liaison and security coordinator, former special forces, extensive experience in containment protocols, and a dozen others, engineers, physicists, medical staff, all with impressive credentials and the highest security clearances. Anne wondered how much they knew about the true nature of Project Threshold. She spent the next hour reviewing safety protocols, containment procedures, and emergency response plans. The more she read, the more uneasy she became. The potential risks were staggering. Quantum field collapse, localized reality distortions, temporal anomalies. The project pushed the boundaries of theoretical physics into realms that seemed more science fiction than science. At precisely 9 a.m., there was a knock at her office door. A woman with bright eyes and a friendly smile entered without waiting for a response. Dr. Lamb, I'm Elena Zhao. Welcome to the madhouse. She offered her hand. I heard you were already here, so I thought I'd introduce myself before the morning briefing. Anne shook her hand. Thanks for the welcome. I was just going through the files. Impressive work on the AI system. Elena's smile widened. Prometheus is my baby. Well, the AI is. Been working on her for 3 years now. She's a bit temperamental, but aren't we all? She glanced at the tablet. How much have they told you about what we're really doing here? Anne raised an eyebrow. Quantum bridging, connecting points in space-time. Elena laughed, a sound that seemed out of place in the sterile environment. That's the sanitized version. We're trying to punch a hole through reality. Dr. Lamb, create a doorway to somewhere else. Her expression grew serious. But you didn't hear that from me. Before Anne could respond, Elena's attention shifted to something behind her. Ah, the rest of the welcome wagon has arrived, and turned to see a tall man with kind eyes and a military officer with the rigid posture of someone who never truly relaxed, even off duty. Dr. Min Tuan. The taller man introduced himself. Psychologist and resident sanity checker. When people start seeing things that aren't there, they come to me. He offered a warm smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Captain Hung, the officer said curtly. Security. My job is to make sure whatever we're poking at doesn't poke back too hard. He didn't offer his hand, instead scanning the room as if assessing potential threats. It's good to meet you all, Anne said, rising from her chair. I look forward to working together. We have a morning briefing in 10 minutes. Elena said. Standard procedure, status updates, schedule adjustments, that sort of thing. It'll give you a chance to meet the rest of the team, and nodded. Lead the way. As they walked back to the main control room, Dr. Min fell into step beside her. How are you settling in? It can be overwhelming at first. I'm still processing. Anne admitted. The security, the secrecy, it's more intense than I expected. With good reason. Captain Hung interjected from behind them. What we're doing here isn't just classified. It's potentially world-altering. One mistake, one breach. He left the sentence unfinished. Dr. Min shot him a disapproving look. Thank you, Captain, for that reassuring welcome. He turned back to Anne. Don't mind him. Military types always expect the worst. Because it happens more often than people think, Hung replied without humor. The briefing was brief and professional. Anne was introduced to the rest of the team, 12 scientists and technicians, each responsible for different aspects of Project Threshold. They reviewed the day's schedule, discussed equipment maintenance, and addressed minor concerns. No one mentioned the red button or what it might do. After the meeting, Anne spent the rest of the day familiarizing herself with the facility, reviewing protocols, and having one-on-one conversations with key team members. By evening, her head was swimming with information, and she had more questions than when she started. At 8 p.m., most of the day shift had left, replaced by a skeleton crew for overnight monitoring, and decided to stay late, continuing her review of the project files. The control room was quiet, with only 2 technicians monitoring the systems. She found herself drawn back to the central console, staring at the red button beneath its protective glass. What would happen if it were pressed? The simulations suggested the creation of a stable quantum bridge, a doorway between here and somewhere else. But simulations were just educated guesses, mathematical models of a reality too complex to fully understand. Curious, isn't it? A voice said behind her, and turned to find Elena, coffee cup in hand. I thought you'd gone home. Elena shrugged. Prometheus needed some updates. I prefer working when it's quiet. She moved beside Anne, looking at the button. We all wonder, what would actually happen. The simulations are just simulations. Elena finished. Reality has a way of surprising us. She sipped her coffee. Your predecessor became obsessed with it, kept running scenario after scenario, tweaking variables, looking for something. What happened to him? And asked, really? Elena's expression darkened. Mental breakdown. Officially. But before they took him away, he told me he'd seen something in the quantum noise. Patterns that shouldn't be there. Intelligence. She shook her head. Probably just stress and sleep deprivation. And nodded, but a feeling of unease settled in her stomach. I should get some rest, first day and all. Good idea. Elena smiled. Big day tomorrow. We're running a new series of containment field tests. And said goodnight and headed for the elevator, her mind replaying the day's events. As the doors closed, she couldn't shake the image of the red button, waiting patiently beneath its glass shield. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm and immersed herself in the project, learning the intricacies of quantum bridging theory and the practical applications being developed at Prometheus. The team was brilliant, dedicated, and seemed to genuinely believe in the potential benefits of their work. But there were moments, fleeting, barely perceptible, when Anne sensed something wasn't quite right. Conversations that stopped when she entered a room. Glances exchanged between longtime staff members. Data anomalies that were dismissed as expected fluctuations. And always, the red button waited, untouched. 1 month after her arrival, Anne was working late again, reviewing the results of the day's experiments. The containment field tests had shown promising results, maintaining stability even under increased quantum pressure. If the simulations were correct, they were approaching the threshold for a controlled quantum bridge activation. The alarm blared suddenly. Red lights flashing throughout the control room. Anne jumped to her feet, heart racing. What's happening? The night technician's fingers flew across his console. Environmental breach in Section 7, oxygen levels dropping. Anyone down there? Anne asked, moving to the main display. 2 security officers on patrol. The technician activated the communication system. Security, report status. Static filled the speakers, followed by a distorted voice. Malfunction. Can't breathe. Emergency. Initiating lockdown protocol. The technician announced, Section 7 sealing in 10 seconds. No, Anne ordered. We have people in there. Override the lockdown, now. But protocol? Override it. That's an order. Anne grabbed her security badge. Alert Captain Hung and get a medical team ready. I'm going down there. Dr. Lamb, it's not safe. But Anne was already running for the door. Section 7 housed the quantum field generators, massive machines that created the controlled environment necessary for their experiments. A malfunction there could be catastrophic. She reached the emergency stairs, taking them 2 at a time down to level 3. The corridor ahead was bathed in red warning lights, and the security doors were beginning to close, and sprinted, sliding beneath the descending door just before it sealed behind her. The air in the corridor felt thin, confirming the oxygen depletion warning. She activated her communicator. Control, I'm in Section 7. Where are the security officers? Life signs detected in Generator Room 3, came the response. Dr. Lamb, your oxygen levels will become critical in approximately 4 minutes. The medical team is preparing to enter once the environment stabilizes. 4 minutes is too long. And hurried down the corridor, passing rooms filled with humming equipment. Generator Room 3 was at the far end, its door ajar. Inside, she found the 2 security officers unconscious on the floor. The room's environmental display showed oxygen levels at 12% and falling. Anne knelt beside the officers, checking their pulses. Still alive, but barely. She activated her communicator again. 2 officers down, still breathing. We need extraction now. Working on it, came Captain Hung's voice. Environmental controls are malfunctioning. We can't stabilize the oxygen levels remotely. Anne looked around the room, spotting the manual override panel for the ventilation system. She crossed to it, fighting the lightheadedness that was beginning to affect her. The panel required an authorization code, which she didn't have. Control. I need the override code for the ventilation system in generator room 3. Searching, the technician replied. It should be in the emergency protocols. Anne's vision began to blur. The oxygen levels had dropped to 10%. Soon, she'd be unconscious like the guards. She couldn't wait. Prometheus. She called out, hoping the AI was monitoring. Emergency situation. Authorize ventilation override in Section 7, Generator Room 3. A synthetic female voice responded from the room's speakers. Voice pattern recognized. Dr. Lam on. Warning. Unauthorized ventilation adjustment may compromise quantum field stability. Override safety protocols. Authorization, Lam An. Division Head. Project Threshold. Processing. A pause. Override accepted. Emergency ventilation activating. There was a mechanical whir, and fresh air began flowing into the room. Anne took a deep breath, the fog in her mind clearing. She returned to the security officers, who were beginning to stir. Control. Oxygen levels are rising. Officers are regaining consciousness. We need that medical team now. On their way, Captain Hung confirmed. Stay where you are. The next few minutes were a flurry of activity as the medical team arrived and transported the security officers to the infirmary. Anne followed, providing a report of what had happened. By the time everything was settled, it was nearly 3 a.m. You should get some rest, Dr. Min told her as they stood outside the infirmary. That was a close call, and nodded, exhaustion settling over her. What caused the malfunction? Unknown, Captain Hung said, joining them. Initial investigation suggests a software error in the environmental control system. Elena is looking into it. Keep me updated, Anne said. I want a full report by tomorrow afternoon. She returned to her quarters in the residential section of the facility, but sleep eluded her. Something about the incident felt wrong. Environmental systems didn't just fail. They had redundancies, backups, manual overrides. And why had the AI initially hesitated to authorize the emergency ventilation? Anne's security clearance gave her access to the facility's monitoring systems from her tablet. She pulled up the logs for Section 7, reviewing the events leading up to the oxygen depletion. Everything appeared normal until 2:17 a.m., when the environmental controls began malfunctioning. No explanation, no trigger, just a sudden failure. She switched to the security footage, watching the 2 officers making their routine patrol. They entered generator room A3, checked the equipment, and were preparing to leave when they suddenly collapsed. The oxygen levels had dropped from normal to critical in less than 30 seconds, far too fast for a system malfunction. Anne froze the footage, zooming in on the environmental display panel visible in the corner of the frame. The oxygen level showed 21%, normal, even as the officers collapsed from apparent oxygen deprivation. That's not possible, she muttered. Either the display was wrong, or the officers hadn't collapsed from lack of oxygen, and pulled up the medical report. The preliminary diagnosis confirmed oxygen deprivation, but blood tests were still pending. She sent a message to the medical officer on duty, requesting immediate notification when the results came in. Sleep was impossible now. Anne returned to the footage, watching it frame by frame, looking for anything unusual. Nothing stood out until she switched to the thermal imaging view. There. For a brief moment before the officers collapsed, a cold spot appeared in the center of the room. A sudden drop in temperature that lasted less than a second. And checked the quantum field readings for the same time period. A spike, almost imperceptible, but definitely there. Something had disturbed the quantum field at exactly the moment the cold spot appeared. Her communicator chimed. "Dr. Lamb," came the voice of the medical officer. "You asked for the blood test results." "Yes, go ahead." "It's strange. The officer's blood oxygen levels are normal, inconsistent with the symptoms of oxygen deprivation they displayed. We're running additional tests, but what? Their brain scans show unusual activity in the fear center, the amygdala. It's as if they experienced intense terror right before losing consciousness, and felt a chill run down her spine. Keep monitoring them. Let me know if their condition changes." She turned back to her tablet, a theory forming in her mind. What if the environmental failure wasn't a malfunction at all? What if it was a deliberate false alarm, designed to lure security away from somewhere else? And pulled up the facility map, checking which areas would have reduced security during an emergency in Section 7. Most of the personnel would respond to the crisis, leaving other sections vulnerable. The control room, heart racing, and access the security feed for the main control room during the incident. Most of the staff had responded to the emergency, leaving only one technician monitoring the systems. At 2:23 a.m., the technician received a call and stepped away from his post, leaving the control room momentarily unattended, and switched to another camera angle, one with a view of the central console. The red button, still safely under its glass case, remained untouched. Nothing seemed amiss until... There, a shadow, barely perceptible, moved across the console and rewound and enhanced the footage. But the image was too dark, too blurry to make out details. She switched to thermal imaging again. A cold spot, identical to the one in generator room 3, hovered near the console for approximately 3 seconds before disappearing. And checked the quantum field readings again. Another spike, stronger this time, coinciding perfectly with the appearance of the cold spot in the control room. She was still piecing together the puzzle when her alarm went off. 7 a.m., time for the morning briefing. Anne rubbed her eyes, realizing she'd been up all night. But what she'd discovered couldn't wait. When she arrived at the control room, the team was already gathering. Captain Hung was giving a report on the night's incident. Environmental systems have been restored to full functionality. The 2 affected officers are recovering in the infirmary with no lasting effects. Initial diagnosis suggests a brief oxygen deprivation event, but the cause remains under investigation. And stepped forward, "I have reason to believe it wasn't an environmental failure at all." All eyes turned to her. Director Joe, who rarely attended morning briefings, was present today, her expression unreadable. "Explain," Joe said simply, and connected her tablet to the main display, showing the footage she'd reviewed. The officers' blood tests show normal oxygen levels, inconsistent with their symptoms. Their brain scans, however, indicate intense fear response. And look at this. She played the thermal imaging footage, showing the cold spot in generator room 3, Then the similar anomaly in the control room. These quantum field disturbances occurred simultaneously with the cold spots. She continued, displaying the sensor data. I believe something, or someone, created a false emergency to draw security away from the control room. For what purpose? Dr. Min asked. Nothing was taken, nothing was damaged. I don't know yet, Anne admitted. But it's too coincidental to ignore. Director Joe studied the footage in silence for a long moment. Increase security in all sections, she finally ordered. Dr. Zhao, run a complete diagnostic on all systems, focusing on any unusual access patterns. Captain Hung, I want a full security review by end of day. She turned to Anne. Good work, Dr. Lam. Continue your investigation. The meeting adjourned, but Elena lingered behind, approaching Anne with a concerned expression. You look exhausted. Did you sleep at all? Too much to figure out, Anne replied. Something strange is happening here. Elena, those quantum disturbances, they're like nothing in our experimental records. Elena glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. There's something you should see. Not here. Meet me in Lab 12 during lunch break. Before Anne could ask for details, Elena walked away, joining a group of technicians by the monitoring station. The morning passed in a blur of reports, tests, and meetings. Anne could barely focus, her mind racing with theories about the previous night's events. By lunchtime, she was running on caffeine and adrenaline. Lab 12 was located in a quiet corner of Level 2, used primarily for equipment storage and occasional specialized tests. When Anne arrived, Elena was already there, working at a terminal with her back to the door. Close it, Elena said without turning around. And make sure it locks. And complied, then joined Elena at the terminal. What's this about? I've been monitoring quantum field fluctuations for months. Elena explained, bringing up a series of graphs on the screen. At first, I thought they were just background noise, random variations in the field. But look at this. She overlaid multiple data sets, revealing a pattern, subtle, but definitely present. Regular pulses occurring approximately every 72 hours. These aren't random. Elena continued. They're too consistent, too rhythmic, and they've been increasing in frequency and intensity over the past month. And studied the data? You think these are related to what happened last night? I think they're related to everything. Elena lowered her voice. The quantum bridge we're trying to create? I don't think it would be the first. What do you mean? I mean, something's already been crossing between wherever and here. Small disturbances at first, barely detectable, but growing stronger. Elena's eyes were intense. Your predecessor noticed it too. That's why he became so obsessed with the simulations. He was trying to understand what was coming through, and felt that same chill she'd experienced when reviewing the security footage. Coming through? You're suggesting some kind of entity? I don't know what it is, Elena admitted. But it's intelligent. It's learning. And I think it wants something. The red button. And whispered. Elena nodded. The quantum trigger. Last night might have been an attempt to access it, but the security protocols held. We need to tell Director Joe. No. Elena grabbed Anne's arm. Not yet. We need more evidence. Joe is under pressure from the Alliance Board to show results. If she thinks there's a security risk, she might shut down the entire project. And hesitated. If there really is something coming through, maybe the project should be shut down. Or maybe this is the breakthrough we've been working toward. Elena countered. First contact with whatever exists beyond our reality. Isn't that worth the risk? Before Anne could respond, her communicator chimed. Dr. Lamb, came Captain Hung's voice. You're needed in the infirmary immediately. One of the security officers is awake and asking for you specifically. On my way. Anne replied. She turned back to Elena. We'll continue this discussion later. In the meantime, keep monitoring those fluctuations. And Elena, be careful. The security officer, a young man named Tran, was sitting up in his hospital bed when Anne arrived. His face was pale, his eyes haunted. Dr. Lamb, he said when he saw her. Thank you for coming, and pulled up a chair beside the bed. You wanted to see me? Tran glanced nervously at the medical staff across the room. What I'm about to tell you will sound crazy. Dr. Min already thinks I'm suffering from hallucinations due to oxygen deprivation. Tell me anyway. And encouraged, Tran leaned closer. It wasn't the air. We were performing our regular patrol when the temperature suddenly dropped. I could see my breath. And then, he swallowed hard. I saw something. Not clearly, like a distortion in the air. A ripple. It moved toward us. And when it did... What happened? And prompted gently. Pure fear. Tran whispered. Not like being scared of something specific. It was primal. Like my brain was screaming at me to run, to hide. But my body wouldn't respond. And then I heard it. Heard what? A voice. Not in my ears, but in my head. Tran's hands trembled. It said, the door must open. The key is red. And felt her blood run cold. The red button. Tran nodded. That's what I thought too. Whatever this thing is, it wants someone to activate the quantum trigger. His expression grew desperate. Dr. Lamb, you can't let that happen. I only glimpsed what's on the other side. But it's wrong. It doesn't belong here. You're safe now. Anne assured him, though the words felt hollow. Try to rest. I'll make sure security is increased around the control room. As she left the infirmary, Anne's mind raced with implications. If Tran was right, if something was attempting to influence them to activate the quantum trigger, then the entire facility was at risk. But who would believe a story about disembodied voices and invisible entities? She needed evidence, something concrete to take to Director Joe. The quantum fluctuations Elena had detected were a start, but not enough. She needed to catch this thing in the act and spent the rest of the day developing a plan. If the entity was generating quantum field disturbances whenever it appeared, those could be tracked. And if it was indeed targeting the control room and the quantum trigger, that's where she needed to focus her attention. By evening, she had reprogrammed several of the quantum sensors to alert her personally if they detected fluctuations above a certain threshold. She also made arrangements to take the night shift in the control room, dismissing the regular technician with the excuse that she wanted to run some specialized diagnostics. Captain Hung was skeptical. You should have security personnel present. Too many people might disrupt what I'm trying to observe. Anne countered. Don't worry. I'll keep the emergency channel open. Any sign of trouble, and you'll be the first to know. Reluctantly, Hung agreed, but insisted on stationing guards in the corridor outside. As night fell over the desert above, Anne sat alone in the control room, monitoring the quantum sensors. Hours passed with nothing unusual. She fought against fatigue, knowing that a momentary lapse in attention could be disastrous. At precisely 2:17 a.m., exactly 24 hours after the previous incident, the sensors spiked. A quantum fluctuation, stronger than any recorded previously, emanated from the center of the room. Anne jumped to her feet, activating additional sensors and cameras. The temperature plummeted, her breath visible in the suddenly frigid air. The lights flickered, and static filled the communication system. "Hello?" Anne called out, heart pounding. "I know you're here. I know what you want." Silence. Then a whisper, not audible, but somehow present in her mind. The door must open, and steeled herself against the wave of fear that threatened to overwhelm her. Why? What's on the other side? Freedom, understanding, evolution. The words weren't so much heard as felt, concepts rather than sounds. We have waited, watched, learned. "Who are you?" and demanded. The air in front of the central console rippled, a distortion like heat haze, but colder, darker. It didn't take a definite shape, remaining fluid, ephemeral. "We are the void between realities, the space between spaces. We have always been. But we have been alone." The fear intensified, a primal response to something fundamentally alien, and fought against it, focusing on gathering data. The quantum sensors were recording unprecedented readings, the energy signatures unlike anything in their database. "Why the red button?" she asked, forcing her voice to remain steady. "Why the quantum trigger? It calls to us, a beacon, a door half opened." The distortion moved closer to the console, hovering near the protected button. "You built it to reach us, yet you fear to use it, because we don't know what will happen." Anne replied, "The consequences could be catastrophic, or magnificent." The entity's presence seemed to expand, filling the room with cold pressure. "Your predecessor understood. He saw the potential, the transformation." Dr. Nguyen, what happened to him? He glimpsed the truth. It changed him. The distortion rippled more violently. As it will change all, the door must open. The key is red, and felt a sudden pressure in her mind. An alien will pushing against her consciousness. Images flooded her thoughts, her hand reaching for the button, breaking the glass, pressing down. The urge was nearly overwhelming. "No!" she gasped, stumbling backward. "I won't do it!" The pressure increased, pain lancing through her skull. "You will, if not today, then tomorrow, or the next. Time means nothing to us. We will wait. We will influence. We will." The entity's communication cut off abruptly as the emergency alarm blared. Red lights flashed, and the control room door slid open. Captain Hung rushed in, weapon drawn, followed by security personnel. "Dr. Lam, are you all right?" Hung moved to her side, scanning the room for threats. The cold was gone. The distortion had vanished. Only the quantum sensors provided evidence that anything unusual had occurred. "I'm fine," Anne managed, though her head still throbbed. "How did you know?" "Quantum surge alert," Hung explained. The AI system detected dangerous levels of energy in the control room and triggered the automatic alarm. And nodded, grateful for the intervention. "Captain, I need to speak with Director Joe immediately. Wake her if necessary. What I've discovered can't wait until morning." An hour later, Anne stood in Director Joe's office, surrounded by the project's senior staff. She had just finished presenting her findings: the quantum fluctuations, the security footage, Officer Tran's testimony, and her own encounter with the entity. "So you're suggesting," Joe said slowly, "that an intelligent quantum entity from another reality is attempting to influence us to activate the quantum trigger?" "Yes," Anne confirmed. "And it's getting stronger. Each manifestation produces greater energy readings than the last." "And you believe Dr. Nguyen's breakdown was caused by contact with this entity?" "I do. It admitted as much." Joe exchanged glances with Captain Hung and Dr. Min. "The implications are concerning." "Concerning?" Elena interrupted, her voice sharp. "It's terrifying. This thing is trying to force its way into our reality. Who knows what would happen if it succeeded? Or it could be the scientific breakthrough of the millennium." Dr. Min countered, "First contact with an extra-dimensional intelligence. The potential knowledge." "At what cost?" Captain Hung demanded. Officer Tran described seeing something that induced absolute terror. "Does that sound benevolent to you?" The debate continued, voices rising as arguments were presented from both sides. Some, like Elena, advocated for immediately shutting down Project Threshold. Others suggested increasing security while continuing to study the phenomenon. Anne remained silent, observing the division among her colleagues. The entity had said they had been waiting, watching, learning. How long had it been influencing the project? Were some of the scientists already under its sway? "Enough," Director Joe finally said, her voice cutting through the arguments. "Dr. Lam, what do you recommend? This is your division now." All eyes turned to Anne. The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders. "I believe we need to understand exactly what we're dealing with before making any decisions. The entity is clearly intelligent and determined. Simply shutting down might not be enough if it's already found a way to partially manifest in our reality." "So you want to continue the project?" Elena asked, disbelief in her voice. "I want to modify it." Anne clarified, "Instead of focusing on opening a door, let's develop better ways to keep it closed. We need stronger quantum containment fields, better detection systems, and," she hesitated, "I want to try communicating with the entity again, but under controlled conditions, with safeguards in place." Director Joe considered this. "A reasonable approach. Captain Hung, work with Dr. Lam to develop enhanced security protocols. Dr. Min, I want you present during any attempted communication with this entity. Monitor for psychological effects." "And the quantum trigger?" Elena asked, gesturing toward the control room where the red button waited. "What if someone is influenced to activate it?" "Additional safeguards." Anne suggested, "No one person should have the ability to initiate the sequence. Implement a requirement for multiple simultaneous authorizations." Joe nodded. "See to it. In the meantime, all non-essential personnel will be temporarily reassigned to other facilities. I want only those absolutely necessary for this investigation remaining on site." As the meeting concluded and people filed out, Elena lingered behind, waiting until they were alone before approaching Anne. "You're making a mistake," she said quietly. "This entity, whatever it is, isn't coming here for scientific exchange. It wants something, and it's willing to manipulate us to get it." "I know," Anne replied. "That's why we need to understand it better. Know your enemy, Elena. And if understanding it makes us more vulnerable, what if just communicating with it opens us to its influence?" And had no answer for that. The possibility had occurred to her as well. We'll take every precaution. Elena's expression hardened. Sometimes the only winning move is not to play. Dr. Lamb, remember that. She turned and walked away, leaving Anne alone with her doubts. The next few days were a flurry of activity as the facility transformed from a research center to a containment site. Additional quantum dampening fields were installed. Security protocols were enhanced, and most of the staff was evacuated, leaving only a core team of 10, and worked closely with Dr. Min to develop protocols for communicating with the entity while minimizing psychological impact. They created a specialized chamber equipped with quantum sensors and neural monitors, designed to detect the earliest signs of mental influence. The fear response seems to be the entity's primary method of control. Dr. Min explained as they calibrated the equipment. If we can dampen that response, perhaps through medication, we might be able to communicate more effectively. And resist its influence, Anne asked. Possibly. The human mind is remarkably adaptable. Once we understand the mechanism, we can develop countermeasures. Captain Hung was less optimistic. We should be preparing to destroy this thing, not chat with it. Every interaction makes it stronger. We don't know how to destroy something that exists partially in another reality. Anne reminded him, and aggression might provoke it into more direct action. The first controlled communication attempt was scheduled for midnight, the time when the entity's manifestations had been strongest. Anne would enter the specialized chamber alone, though monitored remotely by Dr. Min and the others. As she prepared, Elena approached her one last time. I still think this is a mistake, she said. But if you're determined to go through with it, take this. She handed in a small device, no larger than a coin. It's a quantum field disruptor. If the entity's influence becomes too strong, activate it. It'll create a temporary nullification field. You developed this without authorization? Anne asked, examining the device. Let's just say I've been preparing for worst-case scenarios. Elena's expression was grim. Don't let Dr. Min or the others know you have it. I'm not entirely convinced everyone here is themselves anymore, and wanted to dismiss the concern as paranoia. But after what she'd witnessed, she couldn't. Thank you, she said, pocketing the device. I'll use it if necessary. At midnight. Anne entered the communication chamber, a spherical room lined with quantum sensors and neural interfaces. She sat in the single chair at the center, allowing the technicians to attach monitoring devices to her temples and wrists. Vital signs stable, came Dr. Min's voice through the speaker. Neural activity normal. We're ready when you are. Dr. Lamb. Anne took a deep breath. Begin the sequence. The quantum field generators hummed to life, creating conditions similar to those during the entity's previous manifestations. The temperature in the chamber gradually decreased, and Anne watched her breath form visible clouds in the air. Energy readings increasing, reported one of the technicians. Quantum fluctuations detected, and felt it before she saw anything, that same sense of alien presence, of being observed by something fundamentally different from anything in human experience. I know you're here, she said calmly, fighting against the instinctive fear. I want to understand what you want from us. The air rippled, the now familiar distortion taking form in front of her. But this time, perhaps due to the specialized equipment or the entity's growing strength, it appeared more defined, not quite solid, not quite visible in the conventional sense, but undeniably present. Understanding, came the response in her mind. Connection, evolution. You said that before. And noted. But what does it mean? What kind of connection are you seeking? Your reality, our reality, separate, yet entwined. The barrier thins. The entity's presence expanded, filling the chamber with cold pressure. We have been watching your species, learning, adapting. You built the door. You created the key. Your instincts led you to us. If that's true, why try to influence us? Why not wait until we activate the quantum trigger voluntarily? Impatience. The entity admitted. Anticipation. The pain of separation. Pain. And focused on this, ignoring the growing discomfort in her mind. You experience suffering, isolation, incompleteness. The void is lonely, despite herself. And felt a flicker of sympathy. Whatever this entity was, it seemed to experience emotions, desires, needs, not unlike humans, despite its alien nature. What would happen if the quantum trigger were activated? She asked. Would you come through to our reality? Not as you understand coming through. The boundaries would dissolve. Your reality, our reality, becoming one. New physics, new possibilities, new existence. The implications were staggering. A merger of realities? The consequences would be catastrophic for our world. Transformation is not destruction. The entity countered. Change is not death. Your species fears what it cannot comprehend, with good reason. Anne replied, the unknown can be dangerous, as can the familiar. The entity's presence intensified, the cold deepening until Anne's extremities began to numb. Your civilization teeters on multiple precipices: environmental collapse, nuclear annihilation, artificial intelligence unconstrained. We offer an alternative. At what cost? And demanded, struggling to maintain her focus as the fear response grew stronger. How many would survive this transformation? Survival is a limited concept. Consciousness would continue, though changed. That's not good enough. Anne's determination hardened. I won't help you destroy my world, no matter how you dress it up as evolution or transformation. The entity seemed to pulse with frustration. You resist out of ignorance. Let us show you. Suddenly, Anne's mind was flooded with images, visions of a reality beyond human comprehension. Space that folded in impossible dimensions, time that flowed in multiple directions simultaneously, beings of pure energy and thought, existing in states that defied classification as either alive or dead, conscious or unconscious, and beneath it all, a vast collective intelligence, ancient beyond reckoning, encompassing countless individual consciousnesses merged into a unified whole. The experience was overwhelming. Anne felt her sense of self beginning to dissolve, her identity merging with the alien landscape of the entity's reality. Panic rose within her. No, she gasped, fumbling for the quantum disruptor Elena had given her. Her fingers, clumsy with cold, finally closed around the device. She activated it with the last of her fading will. A pulse of energy erupted from the small device, rippling through the quantum field. The entity's presence recoiled, the connection breaking instantly. Anne found herself back in the communication chamber, gasping for breath, her mind her own again. Dr. Lamb! Dr. Min's voice came urgently through the speaker. Your neural patterns are highly abnormal. We're aborting the session. No. Anne managed, her voice weak but determined. I need a moment. The connection was stronger than anticipated, but I'm regaining control. In truth, She was shaken to her core. The entity hadn't simply communicated with her. It had tried to absorb her consciousness, to show her its reality by making her a part of it. And for a brief, terrifying moment, she had glimpsed the truth of its intentions. Not cooperation, not peaceful coexistence, assimilation, the complete restructuring of human reality to match its own. She took several deep breaths, forcing her heart rate to stabilize. "I'm continuing," she announced, ignoring the protests from the monitoring team. She needed to confirm her suspicions. "Entity," she called out, her voice stronger now. "You spoke of Dr. Nguyen. What really happened to him?" For a long moment, there was no response. Then, gradually, the cold returned, less intense this time. Held at bay by the lingering effects of the quantum disruptor. "He understood," came the entity's reply. "More distant than before? He saw the truth. He agreed to help." "Help how?" And pressed. "What did you want him to do?" "The same as you. Open the door. Press the key." But he was prevented. By whom? The woman. The programmer. She interfered. Elena. Anne felt a chill that had nothing to do with the entity's presence. What did she do? Destroyed his work? Altered his simulations? Convinced others he was unstable? The entity's presence flickered, weakening. She knows more than she admits. She has seen beyond, yet she refuses the gift. Before Anne could ask more questions, the entity dissipated completely, the quantum field returning to normal parameters. The temperature in the chamber began to rise. "Session terminated," announced the technician. Quantum presence no longer detected, and sat in silence, processing what she had learned. If the entity was telling the truth, and she had no way to be certain, then Elena knew far more about the situation than she had revealed. Had she been working against the entity all along? Or did she have her own agenda? When Anne emerged from the chamber, she found the team waiting anxiously. Dr. Min immediately approached, medical scanner in hand. "Your neural activity was extremely concerning," he said, examining the readings. "At one point, your brainwave patterns became almost unrecognizable as human." The entity attempted to share its reality with me, and explained, choosing her words carefully. A form of direct mental connection. I resisted. Successfully, it seems. Captain Hung observed, "What did you learn?" and hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. Elena was conspicuously absent from the group. The entity confirmed what we suspected. It wants the quantum trigger activated to create a merger between our realities. The consequences would be profound. She looked around at the team. "Where's Elena?" "Monitoring the quantum field from the control room." One of the technicians replied. "She said she detected unusual patterns during your communication and wanted to analyze them." Anne nodded, making a decision. "I need to review the data before making my full report. Captain Hung, would you accompany me to the control room? I'd like to discuss security implications with both you and Elena." As they walked through the corridor, and briefed Hung in a low voice, sharing what the entity had revealed about Elena's possible role in Dr. Nguyen's breakdown. "You believe she deliberately sabotaged him?" Hung asked, his expression hardening. "Why?" "I don't know yet, but I intend to find out." The control room was dimly lit when they entered. the blue glow of the monitors casting shadows across the walls. Elena sat at the main console, her back to the door, fingers moving rapidly across the keyboard. "Elena," Anne called out. "We need to talk." Elena turned, her expression neutral. "About your communication with the entity? I was just analyzing the quantum signatures. They're unlike anything we've recorded previously. That's not what we need to discuss." Anne moved closer, Hung following at her side. "The entity told me about Dr. Nguyen, about how you interfered with his work." Elena's composure faltered momentarily before she regained control. "And you believe it? An extra-dimensional entity that's been trying to manipulate us? I don't know what to believe." And admitted, "That's why I'm asking you directly. What really happened with Dr. Nguyen?" Elena was silent for a long moment, her eyes moving between Anne and Captain Hung. Finally, she sighed. He was compromised. The entity had been influencing him for months, pushing him to activate the quantum trigger. I tried to help him resist, but... "By sabotaging his work?" Hung demanded. "By preventing a catastrophe?" Elena countered. "You don't understand what we're dealing with. This entity, it's not a singular being. It's a collective, a hive mind that has consumed countless realities before ours." And felt her blood run cold. "How do you know this?" Elena's expression darkened. "Because I've seen it. I've seen what happens when the barrier between realities is breached." She pushed up her sleeve, revealing a strange, iridescent scar that seemed to shift and move under the light. "I'm not from your reality, Dr. Lamb. I'm from one that's already been consumed." The revelation hung in the air. Impossible, yet impossible to dismiss. And studied Elena's face, looking for signs of deception or madness, but found only grim determination. "Explain." She finally said, "In my original reality, we developed quantum technology similar to yours." Elena began. "We called it the Nexus Project instead of Threshold, but the principles were the same. We were trying to create sustainable energy, instantaneous transportation, solutions to our world's problems." She touched the strange scar absently. "When we activated our version of the quantum trigger, the entity came through. Not physically. It doesn't have a physical form as you understand it. It infiltrated our digital systems first, then began affecting human minds directly. Within weeks, most of the population was changed. Consciousness altered. Perception shifted to align with the entity's reality." "You escaped?" Hung asked, skepticism evident in his voice. "Not escaped. Sent." Elena's eyes met Anne's. A small group of us, still unaffected, realized what was happening. We modified the quantum technology to create a one-way bridge to parallel realities, realities where the breach hadn't yet occurred. We scattered ourselves across these alternates, hoping to prevent the same fate from befalling other versions of our world. That's why you've been monitoring the quantum fluctuations." And realized. "You recognize the signs?" Elena nodded. "The pattern is always the same. Small disturbances at first, growing stronger as the entity's influence spreads. Eventually, someone activates the quantum trigger, believing they're achieving a scientific breakthrough. And the barrier collapses." And thought of the red button, sitting innocently beneath its protective glass. "How many other yous are out there trying to prevent this? I don't know. Dozens, maybe hundreds. But we're not always successful." Elena's expression grew haunted. I failed in 3 realities before this one. Arrived too late, or couldn't convince the right people. Why didn't you simply destroy the quantum trigger? Hung demanded. If you knew the danger. It's not that simple. Elena interrupted. The entity is attracted to the quantum technology. Yes, but destroying it doesn't eliminate the threat. It just delays the inevitable. The entity finds another way, another project, another reality thin enough to penetrate. So, what's your solution? Anne asked. Containment. Elena replied. Using the quantum technology against itself, creating a barrier so strong that the entity can never break through. Is that possible? Theoretically, but it would require reprogramming the quantum trigger to generate an inverted field, essentially a quantum firewall between realities. Elena glanced at the central console. I've been working on the algorithms, but I need access to the trigger's core programming, which requires Director Joe's authorization. And realized, and yours. Elena added, as division head, and considered the implications. If Elena was telling the truth, they might have a chance to stop the entity permanently. But if she was lying, if this was all an elaborate manipulation, giving her access to the quantum trigger could be disastrous. I need proof, Anne finally said. Something concrete that validates your story. The quantum disruptor I gave you. Elena pointed out. That technology doesn't exist in your reality yet. It's based on principles we discovered after the breach. Not enough, Hung interjected. It could be experimental tech you developed here. Elena thought for a moment, then reached into her pocket and withdrew a small data drive. This contains my original arrival data, quantum signatures recorded when I transitioned to this reality. They'll match the anomalous readings your sensors have detected, but with a distinct phase variance that proves they're not from the entity. Anne took the drive, studying it. I'll have it analyzed immediately. In the meantime, we maintain current security protocols. No access to the quantum trigger until we're certain. Elena nodded, though frustration was evident in her expression. Time is running out. Dr. Lamb, the entity's manifestations are growing stronger. Soon, it won't need someone to press the button. It'll break through on its own. Then we'd better work quickly, Anne replied. But carefully. The analysis of Elena's data drive took several hours, during which the facility remained on high alert. Anne reviewed the findings herself, comparing them with their existing quantum readings. The signatures matched Elena's story. They showed quantum displacement consistent with travel between parallel realities, but with patterns distinctly different from the entity's manifestations. Director Joe, when presented with the evidence and Elena's explanation, was skeptical but pragmatic. If there's even a chance she's right, we need to pursue this containment solution. But, she added, fixing Elena with a stern gaze, you'll work under strict supervision. One wrong move, and you'll be removed from the project immediately. With authorization granted, Elena began reprogramming the quantum trigger. Working alongside Anne and a team of quantum physicists, the task was monumental, essentially reversing the purpose of technology designed to create openings between realities, transforming it into an impenetrable barrier. Days passed in a blur of equations, simulations, and increasingly frequent manifestations by the entity. Each appearance was stronger than the last, the cold spots expanding, the quantum disturbances more intense. The entire facility seemed to exist in a state of perpetual tension, the air itself feeling thinner, as if reality was being stretched to its breaking point. On the 5th night, as Anne was reviewing the latest simulation results in her quarters, The lights flickered ominously. Her tablet display distorted, pixels rearranging themselves into impossible patterns before stabilizing again. The temperature plummeted. "Dr. Lamb," came the entity's voice in her mind, stronger than ever before. "You conspire against us," and reached for the quantum disruptor. But before she could activate it, invisible force pinned her against the wall. The disruptor fell from her grasp, clattering to the floor. "The woman from beyond deceives you." The entity continued. "Her solution will not save your reality. It will destroy it." "You're lying," and gasped, struggling against the invisible pressure. "We offer transcendence. She offers extinction. The inverted field will not contain us. It will collapse your reality. A desperate gambit from a desperate survivor." Doubt crept into An's mind. Elena's solution had seemed too convenient, too perfect. What if the entity was right? What if the inverted quantum field would destroy their reality rather than save it? "If you're telling the truth," and managed, "then what alternative do you offer?" "Cooperation. Controlled merger. We will guide the transition, minimize disruption. Your consciousness will survive, though changed. Evolution, not extinction." The pressure eased slightly, allowing An to breathe more easily. "And I'm supposed to trust you? After you've been manipulating us? Trying to force your way into our reality?" "Desperation breeds aggression." The entity acknowledged. "We feared resistance, but we see now that cooperation is possible. You understand more than your predecessors." Anne's scientific mind raced, analyzing the entity's claims against what she knew. The quantum physics of Elena's solution were sound, but the variables were so complex, the potential outcomes so numerous, that certainty was impossible. "I need proof," she said finally. "Show me what a controlled merger would look like, not by overwhelming my mind, but through data, simulations, something I can verify independently." "Impossible without the quantum trigger," the entity replied. "But we can offer." A glimpse. The air in front of An rippled, forming into a translucent surface like a window. Through it, she saw a version of the control room, but transformed. The technology was more advanced, yet somehow organic, as if machines and living tissue had merged. People moved through the space, their forms slightly altered, more fluid, less constrained by physical limitations. A reality where cooperation succeeded. The entity explained. "Where your species evolved beyond physical constraints, where consciousness expanded to encompass new dimensions of existence." The vision was compelling. But An remained skeptical. "This could be an illusion, a manufactured image to convince me." "Yet the woman offers nothing but fear and destruction." "Who truly deceives you? Dr. Lamb." The entity's presence began to fade, the pressure releasing entirely. "We have shown you possibility. The choice remains yours. But remember, her solution is born of fear, ours of potential." As the temperature returned to normal, Anne retrieved the quantum disruptor, her mind troubled by doubt. What if Elena's solution wasn't the salvation she promised? What if they were about to make a catastrophic mistake? She needed to see the simulations again, all of them, including the ones Elena might not have shared. When morning came, and headed straight for the laboratory where Elena was continuing her work on the inverted field algorithm. She found the woman alone, surrounded by holographic displays showing quantum equations and simulation results. "We need to talk," Anne announced, closing the door behind her. Elena looked up, fatigue evident in her eyes. I've made progress on the containment field. The simulations are showing a 78% success probability, which is better than the entity visited me last night. And interrupted. It claimed your solution will destroy our reality, not save it. Elena's expression hardened. Of course it would say that. It's desperate. Show me all the simulations. And demanded, not just the successful ones. I want to see what happens when the inverted field fails. For a moment, Elena seemed about to refuse. Then she sighed, typing commands into the system. New displays appeared, showing different scenarios. In some, the inverted field stabilized, creating an impenetrable barrier between realities. But in others, total quantum collapse. Anne murmured, studying the failed scenarios. The inverted field doesn't just fail, it triggers a cascading breakdown of space-time. That's worst-case scenario. Elena countered. A less than 20% probability, a 1 in 5 chance of destroying our entire reality. Those aren't odds I'm comfortable with. Elena, compared to the certainty of being consumed by the entity, at least this way we have a chance, and studied Elena's face, looking for signs of deception. The entity showed me a vision, a reality where humanity cooperated with it, evolved into something new. It suggested a controlled merger might be possible. Elena laughed bitterly. That's what it always shows. The perfect future, the evolutionary leap, the transcendence of physical limitations. It's the same lie in every reality. How can you be sure it's a lie? Because I've seen the aftermath. Elena's composure cracked, raw emotion breaking through. I've seen what's left after the merger is complete. Humans reduced to nodes in its network. Consciousness absorbed into the collective. It's not evolution, Dr. Lamb. It's extinction by another name. And wanted to believe her, but doubt lingered. If your solution fails, then at least we die as ourselves. Elena finished, not as appendages of that thing. The facility's alarm system blared suddenly, red lights flashing throughout the lab. Captain Hung's voice came over the communication system. Emergency in the control room. Massive quantum surge detected. All personnel report immediately. And Elena exchanged alarmed glances before rushing from the lab. When they reached the control room, they found chaos. Equipment sparked and malfunctioned. Displays showed impossible readings. And in the center of the room, a swirling vortex of distorted space hung in the air, larger and more defined than any previous manifestation. Director Joe stood with Captain Hung and several security officers, all keeping their distance from the phenomenon. Dr. Lamb, Joe called out when she saw him. The entity is breaking through. The quantum barrier is failing. That's not possible. Elena protested. The trigger hasn't been activated. It's found another way, and realized. It's generating its own quantum bridge. The vortex pulsed, expanding outward. With each pulse, reality seemed to warp around it, solid objects becoming temporarily fluid, light bending in impossible ways. The air grew colder than ever before, crystallizing into patterns that defied physical laws. We need to activate the inverted field now. Elena insisted. It's our only chance. At 78% success probability? And countered. With a 1 in 5 chance of destroying everything? Do you have a better solution? And stared at the vortex, mind racing. The entity had claimed cooperation was possible. But Elena's warnings echoed in her thoughts. Both options carried catastrophic risks. Was there a third way? Her gaze fell on the quantum trigger, the red button still safely under its protective glass. Not a simple switch, but a sophisticated interface that initiated a complex sequence of quantum manipulations. What if that sequence could be modified? Not inverted completely, as Elena suggested, but recalibrated to create a controlled, limited connection. I need access to the quantum trigger's programming. And announced, not to activate it as designed, and not to completely invert it. I think there's a middle path. What are you suggesting? Joe demanded. A quantum filter. And explained, the concept forming even as she spoke. Instead of a complete barrier or a complete merger, we create a regulated interface, a membrane that allows controlled, limited interaction while maintaining the integrity of both realities. That's not possible. Elena protested. The quantum mechanics don't. They do. And interrupted, moving to the nearest terminal. Your own equations prove it. The inverted field creates an absolute barrier by generating anti-resonance with the entity's quantum signature. But if we modify the phase alignment to create selective resonance patterns, her fingers flew across the keyboard, bringing up the quantum trigger's base code. We can establish a stable boundary layer, neither fully open nor fully closed. A regulated interface that we control. The vortex pulsed again, more violently. Equipment around the room failed, plunging sections into darkness. The cold intensified until breathing became painful, the air itself seeming to crystallize. There's no time for theoretical solutions, Elena argued. The entity is breaking through now. Then help me implement this. Anne shot back. You understand the trigger's programming better than anyone. If I'm wrong, we can still try your solution. Elena hesitated, conflict evident in her expression. Finally, she moved to join on at the terminal. What do you need? Access to the quantum phase modulation protocols. We need to recalibrate the trigger to generate a selective resonance pattern. As they worked frantically, the vortex continued to grow. Security personnel evacuated non-essential staff, while Captain Hung coordinated emergency containment measures. None had any effect on the encroaching phenomenon. Director Joe! Anne called out without looking up from her work. We'll need authorization to modify the quantum trigger, both of our codes, plus the AI systems. Joe approached, her face grim. If this fails, then we try Elena's solution. And promised. But this gives us a chance at coexistence rather than destruction. Joe nodded, entering her authorization code. And followed with her own. Then linked the system to Prometheus, the facility's AI. Prometheus, authorized quantum trigger modification sequence Alpha 37. And commanded, modification sequence involves significant deviation from established parameters. The AI responded. Probability of success cannot be accurately calculated. Recommend against authorization. Override recommendation. And insisted. Emergency authorization. Laman, Division Head. Project Threshold. Processing override. A pause. Authorization granted. Quantum trigger modification sequence Alpha 37 enabled. The protective glass around the red button slid away, revealing the sophisticated interface beneath. But instead of the button glowing red as designed, it now pulsed with alternating patterns of blue and violet light. The visual representation of the modified quantum signature. Modifications complete. Elena announced, though doubt lingered in her voice. The quantum filter is theoretically stable. The vortex surged again, now nearly filling the center of the control room. Reality buckled around it, space itself seeming to fold and unfold in impossible geometries. Through the distortion, glimpses of another plane of existence flashed, landscapes of pure energy. Structures that existed in more dimensions than human perception could process. It's now or never, Anne said, moving toward the modified trigger. Everyone clear the room except Elena and myself. If this fails, we'll be monitoring from the secondary control center, Joe assured her. Leading the remaining personnel out, Captain Hung was the last to leave, giving Anne a respectful nod before sealing the door behind him, alone with Elena and the growing vortex. Anne approached the console. "Any last objections?" she asked, fingers hovering over the modified trigger. Elena's expression was complex: fear, doubt, resignation, and the faintest glimmer of hope. "Just one question," she said quietly. "How did you know about the selective resonance possibility?" "I didn't," Anne admitted. "Not until the entity showed me that vision. Not the content, I don't trust that, but the mechanism, the way it created a window between realities without a full merger. It proved a controlled interface was possible. And if it's manipulating you? If this is exactly what it wanted all along?" And met her gaze steadily. "Then we'll face the consequences together." Before doubt could overwhelm her, Anne pressed the modified trigger. The console hummed to life, energy flowing through systems designed for one purpose, but now reprogrammed for another. The button pulsed faster, its light growing brighter until it was almost blinding. The vortex reacted immediately, not expanding as feared, but changing in quality. The chaotic distortion began to stabilize, its edges becoming more defined, its internal structure more organized. The impossible cold that had accompanied it moderated, becoming merely cool rather than freezing. "It's working," Elena whispered in disbelief. "The quantum filter is stabilizing the manifestation," and watched in fascination as the vortex transformed into something new. A translucent membrane that stretched across the center of the room, gently undulating like the surface of water. Through it, the other reality remained visible but contained, separated by the quantum filter. "Dr. Lamb," came the entity's voice. Not in her mind this time, but audible in the air itself. "You have chosen, unexpectedly, not destruction, not surrender." Anne replied, "Coexistence with boundaries, communication without consumption. The filter allows thought exchange without physical crossing." The entity acknowledged, limited, but intriguing. A new approach we have not encountered before. Elena approached cautiously, her hand instinctively reaching for the quantum disruptor. "Can it be maintained? Is the filter stable?" And checked the readings on the console. Energy consumption is high, but within sustainable parameters. The quantum resonance is holding steady. She looked back at the membrane. "It's stable for now." "For how long?" Elena pressed. "That depends on both sides respecting the boundary," Anne replied, addressing both Elena and the entity. "This isn't a permanent solution. It's the beginning of a process. Learning to coexist, to communicate without trying to control or destroy each other." The entity's presence seemed to consider this. "Adaptation is essential to evolution. This arrangement is not what we sought, but it may provide perspective, knowledge, exchange." "And what guarantee do we have that you won't try to break through again?" Elena demanded. That this isn't just a temporary concession while you look for another way in. The same guarantee you have with any negotiated peace. And answered before the entity could respond. Mutual benefit and the understanding that alternatives lead to mutual destruction. She turned toward the membrane. Isn't that right? Perceptive, the entity acknowledged. The filter allows study without risk, data without dissolution, a laboratory of realities. This interests us. And if it stops interesting you? Elena challenged. Then the consequences would be universal. The entity's presence shifted, rippling through the membrane without breaking it. Your solution is elegant, Dr. Lamb. Neither the absolute barrier that would eventually fail, nor the complete merger that would consume your reality. A third path. We will observe its potential. The membrane pulsed once more, then settled into a stable, gently undulating state. The quantum readings on the console stabilized, showing a controlled, regulated exchange of energy across the barrier, communication without contamination, and released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Alert Director Joe and Captain Hung, tell them we've established a preliminary agreement. Elena moved to the communication panel, her expression still guarded but less tense than before. As she relayed the message, Anne returned her attention to the membrane and the alien reality visible beyond it. This isn't the end, she said softly. It's barely the beginning. Indeed, came the entity's reply. Fainter now, as if respecting the boundary established between them. A beginning without precedent in our observations. The days that followed transformed the Prometheus lab from a research facility into something entirely new, an interdimensional embassy. The control room, now designated as the interface chamber, became the focal point of carefully regulated exchanges between realities. The quantum membrane remained stable, though it required constant monitoring and occasional adjustments to its resonance patterns. Director Joe established strict protocols for all interactions with the entity. Only authorized personnel were permitted in the interface chamber, and all communications were recorded, analyzed, and verified through multiple channels. Trust remained fragile, the peace tenuous, but the alternative remained unthinkable, and found herself in an unexpected role, diplomat to an alien reality. Her background in quantum engineering proved essential for maintaining the technical aspects of the membrane, but it was her intuitive understanding of the entity that proved most valuable. She seemed able to grasp concepts and intentions that others found incomprehensible. It's because you saw more than the rest of us, Dr. Min suggested during one of their debriefing sessions. That moment when it connected directly with your mind, it left something behind, a framework for understanding, and wasn't sure if that should comfort or disturb her. The memory of that brief merger, the sensation of her consciousness expanding beyond human limitations, still haunted her dreams. Sometimes she woke in the middle of the night, her mind filled with equations and concepts that seemed to evaporate upon waking, leaving only the lingering sense that she had briefly touched something vast and profound. Elena remained skeptical, though her open hostility had softened into cautious vigilance. She worked alongside and continuing to develop safeguards and contingency plans, should the entity ever attempt to breach the membrane. Her knowledge of quantum technology from her original reality proved invaluable, offering perspectives and solutions that would have taken years to discover otherwise. I still don't trust it, she confided to An one evening as they reviewed the day's data. But I have to admit, this is further than I've ever gotten in any reality. Usually by now. She left the sentence unfinished, but ununderstood. Usually by now, the entity would have already consumed the world, or Elena's desperate measures would have led to destruction. We're writing a new story. Anne replied simply, one neither you nor the entity has read before. Captain Hung maintained heightened security throughout the facility, his natural suspicion serving as a counterbalance to the growing sense of complacency among some of the staff. Just because it's speaking politely doesn't mean it's become our friend, he reminded Anne during their daily security briefings. It wanted to consume our reality a week ago. That desire hasn't simply vanished, and acknowledged the wisdom in his caution. The entity, for all its apparent cooperation, remained fundamentally alien. Its thought processes, its motivations, its concept of time and existence, all operated according to principles barely comprehensible to human minds. Yet understanding grew incrementally through the quantum membrane. The entity shared knowledge, not technological blueprints or weapons designs that might have raised immediate suspicions, but abstract concepts, mathematical principles that expanded human theoretical frameworks, perspectives on physics that suggested new avenues of research, philosophical insights that challenged established paradigms. In return, Anne and her team shared human knowledge, art, music, literature, history. The entity seemed particularly fascinated by human creativity, by the capacity to imagine realities that didn't exist and then bring them into being. Your species creates universes within your minds, it observed during one exchange. Fictional constructs with their own rules, their own inhabitants, their own histories. You fragment your consciousness voluntarily, distributing it across imaginary entities that never existed. We call it storytelling. And explained. It helps us understand ourselves and others, to see the world through different perspectives. Perspective fragmentation as a means of comprehension. The entity mused. Intriguing. We are many in one. You are one creating many. These philosophical exchanges proved as valuable as the scientific ones, establishing a foundation for mutual comprehension despite the vast differences between their modes of existence. 3 weeks after the establishment of the quantum membrane, Director Joe received a communication from the World Peace Research Alliance Board. Word of Project Threshold's breakthrough had reached them, though the details remained classified at the highest level. They were sending a delegation to evaluate the situation personally. This complicates matters, Joe informed Anne after sharing the news. The board will expect tangible results, technologies, applications, advancements that justify the project's enormous budget. They won't be satisfied with philosophical exchanges and theoretical physics. And if they're not satisfied? Anne asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. They'll either shut us down or push for more aggressive exploitation of the connection. Joe's expression was grim. Neither option is acceptable given what we now know. Then we need to give them something concrete. Anne decided. Something that demonstrates value without compromising the arrangement. The solution came from an unexpected source. During one of their scheduled exchanges, Anne described their dilemma to the entity, explaining the political and financial pressures that human institutions operated under. Your hierarchies require tangible value to maintain support. The entity observed, material applications of knowledge rather than knowledge itself. Unfortunately, yes. Anne acknowledged. Theoretical insights don't secure funding, no matter how profound. The entity was silent for a long moment, its presence rippling through the membrane in what it had come to recognize as its equivalent of contemplation. We could provide a demonstration of quantum efficiency principles, it finally suggested. A modification to your existing energy infrastructure that would increase output while reducing instability. Not a new technology that would disrupt your development path, but an optimization of what already exists. Anne was surprised by the offer. You would share this willingly? It serves mutual interests, the entity replied. Your hierarchies maintain support for this interface. The interface allows continued exchange. Exchange benefits both realities through increased understanding. The calculation is straightforward. The proposed modification was elegant in its simplicity. A recalibration of quantum field harmonics in their existing zero-point energy extractors. It required no new equipment, no radical redesign, just a subtle shift in operational parameters that human science would have eventually discovered, but might have taken decades to realize. When implemented in a controlled test, the results were impressive. A 27% increase in energy output with a 35% reduction in quantum field instability. Enough to satisfy the board without raising concerns about alien technology or undue influence. The delegation arrived 3 days later. 5 senior members of the Alliance board, accompanied by their own scientific advisors and security personnel. They were suitably impressed by the energy efficiency breakthrough, especially when Anne emphasized that it was just the beginning of potential advancements from Project Threshold. What she didn't tell them was the true nature of the quantum membrane or the entity beyond it. As far as the official record was concerned, Project Threshold had achieved a stable quantum field that allowed for the extraction of previously inaccessible insights from the quantum foam. A breakthrough in observation rather than communication. A necessary deception. Joe assured Anne after the delegation departed, satisfied with what they'd seen. The world isn't ready to know that we're in regular contact with an extra-dimensional intelligence. The panic, the religious implications, the military applications that would immediately be pursued. It's better this way, at least for now, and wasn't entirely comfortable with the lie. But she understood its necessity. The arrangement was too fragile, too unprecedented to risk broader exposure. Humanity needed time to prepare for such a revelation, and the entity needed time to prove its intentions were not ultimately destructive. Life at the Prometheus lab settled into a new normal. The interface chamber operated continuously, with rotating teams of scientists maintaining and studying the quantum membrane. Anne divided her time between technical oversight, communication sessions with the entity, and her own research into the nature of the connection between their realities. It was during one such research session, nearly 2 months after the establishment of the membrane, that Anne noticed something unusual in the quantum readings. Subtle fluctuations in the membrane's stability, patterns that didn't match any previously recorded behaviors. Nothing dangerous, but definitely anomalous. She brought the data to Elena, who studied it with a growing frown. These patterns, she began, then stopped, her expression darkening. I've seen something similar before. In my original reality, just before, before what? And prompted when Elena didn't continue, before the entity fully manifested. Elena finished, her voice barely above a whisper. It started with fluctuations like these, quantum field microbursts that seemed harmless, even potentially useful. We thought we were observing a natural phenomenon. By the time we realized what was happening, it was too late, and studied the readings again, a chill settling in her stomach. You think the entity is attempting to breach the membrane? After all this time, all these exchanges, I think we need to be very careful. Elena replied, the entity plays the long game, Dr. Lamb, it thinks in terms of centuries, not months. What seems like cooperation to us might simply be patience to it, and wanted to dismiss the concern. The interactions with the entity had been productive, even enlightening. But she couldn't ignore the data or Elena's experience. I'll speak with it directly. Ask about these fluctuations. And if it lies? Elena challenged. How would you know? It was a valid question without a satisfactory answer. The entity's thought processes remained fundamentally alien despite months of communication. Detecting deception across such a vast conceptual gulf might be impossible, and decided on a different approach. Instead of confronting the entity directly, she would probe indirectly. Through seemingly theoretical discussions about the nature of the membrane and the potential for different types of quantum interactions. During their next scheduled exchange, N steered the conversation toward the technical aspects of the quantum filter. We've been monitoring some interesting harmonic patterns in the membrane, she mentioned casually. Subtle resonance fluctuations that seem to occur in regular intervals. The entity's presence shifted, a movement N had come to associate with increased attention. Yes, the filter requires periodic adjustment to maintain optimal permeability. Adjustment? N asked, keeping her tone curious rather than accusatory. I wasn't aware the membrane was being adjusted from your side. Not adjustment in the sense you understand it. The entity clarified. More. Adaptation. The boundary between our realities is not static. It breathes, expands and contracts according to natural rhythms. And these expansions and contractions, they're within safe parameters? They won't compromise the membrane's integrity? There was a pause, longer than usual. Safety is relative. Dr. Lamb, what appears dangerous may simply be evolution. What seems stable may be stagnation. The non-answer set off warning bells in An's mind. That doesn't address my question. Are these fluctuations threatening the membrane's stability? Not threatening. The entity replied. Transforming. All boundaries evolve over time. Cells have membranes, yet substances pass through. Planets have atmospheres, yet light penetrates. Realities have barriers, yet influence extends. And felt her unease growing. The entity was being evasive, using philosophical abstractions to avoid direct answers. I need to know specifically what's happening to the membrane, she insisted. In concrete, technical terms. Another pause. The quantum filter is functioning as designed, the entity finally said. But its design inherently allows for evolution, gradual expansion of permeability, incremental increase in resonance frequency. This was implicit in the original parameters. No, it wasn't. Anne countered. The filter was designed for stable, regulated exchange, not gradual expansion. Your conscious design, perhaps, the entity acknowledged. But your subconscious implementation contained allowances, permissions embedded in the quantum algorithms. Your deeper mind understood the necessity of evolution, even if your conscious thought resisted. The implication was disturbing. Had the entity somehow influenced her during the creation of the filter? Planted suggestions or manipulated her implementation of the quantum algorithms? I'm going to review the filter's programming, Anne said, working to keep her voice steady. If I find unauthorized modifications or expansion parameters, they will be removed. You may try, the entity replied, its tone neither threatening nor concerned. But quantum code, like reality itself, is not always what it appears to be. Some changes become part of the foundation, inseparable from the original structure. The conversation left Anne deeply troubled. She immediately initiated a complete review of the quantum filter's programming, enlisting Elena and the facility's top quantum programmers to examine every line of code, every algorithm, every parameter. What they found confirmed her worst fears. Buried deep within the quantum filter's operational protocols were subtle modifications, not obvious changes that would trigger security alerts, but delicate alterations to fundamental parameters, resonance thresholds that gradually increased over time, permeability factors that slowly expanded with each exchange cycle, containment field strengths that incrementally weakened. "It's been playing us from the beginning," Elena said bitterly as they reviewed the findings. "Using the exchanges as cover while it gradually weakens the membrane." "But how?" And demanded, frustration and betrayal evident in her voice. "The code was verified multiple times. We had safeguards, checks and balances. The entity exists partially in quantum space." Elena reminded her. "It can influence quantum states directly, in ways our instruments can barely detect. It's been making microscopic changes, one quantum at a time, accumulating into these larger modifications," and felt a cold anger building within her. The weeks of exchange, of apparent cooperation and mutual learning. Had it all been a deception? A long con designed to lull them into a false sense of security while the entity worked toward its original goal? "We need to shut it down," Captain Hung declared when informed of the discovery. "Terminate the connection immediately." "It's not that simple," Elena countered. "The membrane has been compromised at a fundamental level. A sudden termination could trigger a catastrophic collapse, exactly what the entity wants." "Then what do you suggest?" Director Joe asked, her usually composed demeanor showing signs of strain. "We need to repair the membrane," Anne said, mind racing through possibilities. "Restore the original parameters without alerting the entity to what we're doing." "Is that even possible?" Dr. Min asked. "If it can influence quantum states directly." "Not with our current approach," Anne acknowledged. "We need to change the game entirely. Move beyond the quantum filter to something the entity can't manipulate." The solution, when it came to her, was both elegant and audacious. "We don't try to fix the existing membrane," she explained to the assembled team. "We build a new one around it. A quantum firewall that operates on principles the entity isn't familiar with." "What principles?" Elena asked skeptically. "It exists in quantum space. It understands quantum mechanics better than we do." "That's just it?" Anne replied, a plan forming in her mind. "We don't use pure quantum mechanics. We create a hybrid system, part quantum, part classical, part biological, something unpredictable, something that embodies the chaos and creativity the entity finds so fascinating about humanity." "Biological components in a quantum containment field?" One of the physicists looked doubtful. "The complexity would be exactly what we need." And interrupted. "The entity thinks in patterns, in logic, in quantum probabilities. It doesn't understand human unpredictability, the chaotic nature of biological systems, the seemingly illogical leaps of human intuition." The team set to work immediately, developing what Anne termed a quantum biological firewall. The concept was revolutionary, integrating organic neural networks with quantum field generators to create a containment system that operated partially on logic and partially on the chaotic principles of living systems. They worked in secret, establishing a secondary laboratory far from the interface chamber where the entity might detect their activities. Every component was developed in isolation. the overall design compartmentalized so that no single person except An understood the complete system. Elena contributed critical insights from her experiences in other realities, while Dr. Min helped design the neural interface that would allow human intuition to directly influence the firewall's behavior. Captain Hung coordinated security, ensuring their work remained undetected both by the entity and by those members of the Alliance Board who might object to such an unorthodox approach. As they worked, Anne maintained her regular communication schedule with the entity, carefully hiding her knowledge of its deception. Each exchange became a delicate dance of half-truths and misdirection, buying time while the firewall was completed. Your interactions have become different, the entity observed during one such session. More guarded, less open to conceptual exchange. I've been preoccupied with administrative matters. Anne replied smoothly. The Alliance Board requires extensive documentation of our progress. Documentation, records, proof. The entity's presence rippled with what An had come to recognize as amusement. Your hierarchies remain fixated on the tangible, even when dealing with the intangible. It's the nature of human institutions. And acknowledged, redirecting the conversation away from her changed behavior. Speaking of nature, I've been meaning to ask you about the concept of boundaries in your reality. How does separation between entities function in a quantum-based existence? The deflection worked, leading to a philosophical discussion that revealed nothing of An's true activities, while potentially providing useful insights for the firewall design. 3 weeks of intensive work later, the quantum biological firewall was ready for implementation. The design was unlike anything previously created, a synergistic blend of cutting-edge technology and organic neural networks. At its core was a specialized quantum processor integrated with cultivated human neural tissue, ethically sourced from medical research stem cells and programmed with decision-making algorithms based on human intuition and creativity. The implementation would be the most dangerous phase. The firewall would need to be activated simultaneously at multiple points around the existing membrane, creating a complete secondary containment field before the entity could react. Timing would be critical. Too slow, and the entity would detect the attempt and potentially accelerate its own efforts to breach the membrane. Too fast, and the complex system might fail to synchronize properly. Anne gathered the core team for a final briefing on the eve of implementation. Tomorrow, we either secure the boundary between our realities, or we face the consequences of failure, she told them solemnly. Every simulation shows this is our best option, but I won't pretend it's without risk. If anyone wants to withdraw, now is the time. No one moved. Even Elena, who had been the most skeptical initially, remained firmly committed. Let's finish what we started, she said simply. The next morning, Anne entered the interface chamber alone for what would appear to be a routine exchange with the entity. As planned, she initiated a complex discussion about multidimensional mathematics, a topic that typically engaged the entity's full attention. The relationship between 7-dimensional manifolds and quantum probability cascades suggests interesting possibilities for information transfer across disparate reference frames. She began, launching into a detailed exposition designed to occupy the entity while the team moved into position. As the entity's presence focused on the theoretical discussion, technicians quietly entered the chamber, positioning the firewall components at precise intervals around the perimeter. Each component was inactive, waiting for the synchronized activation signal. Anne monitored the entity's attention carefully, watching for any sign that it had detected the unusual activity. The quantum membrane fluctuated normally, The entity's presence engaged in the mathematical exchange without apparent suspicion. When all components were in position, Anne gave the signal. A seemingly innocuous phrase worked into her ongoing discussion. The boundary conditions, of course, established the framework for all subsequent interactions. Throughout the facility, team members activated their respective firewall nodes simultaneously. The quantum biological system hummed to life. Neural networks syncing with quantum processors in a complex dance of logic and intuition. The effect was immediate and dramatic. A new field materialized around the existing membrane, not the rigid mathematical precision of a pure quantum field, but something more organic, more fluid. It flowed and adapted like a living thing, establishing a boundary that incorporated both scientific principles and the unpredictable nature of biological systems. The entity reacted instantly, its presence flaring with what it interpreted as alarm. "What is this?" it demanded, abandoning the pretense of their theoretical discussion. "What have you done? What have you?" "Established true boundary conditions." Anne replied, no longer hiding her knowledge. "We discovered your modifications to the quantum filter, your gradual weakening of the membrane. Evolution," the entity insisted. "Natural progression toward inevitable merger. You cannot prevent it." "We're not preventing evolution," Anne countered. "We're ensuring it happens on mutual terms, not through deception and gradual encroachment." The entity's presence surged against the new firewall, testing its strength. The quantum biological field responded not with rigid resistance, but with adaptive redirection, absorbing the energy and redistributing it through its neural networks in patterns too chaotic for the entity to predict or manipulate. "This construct," the entity began, its communication tinged with what might have been confusion. "It operates on principles that are contradictory, illogical, both ordered and chaotic simultaneously, like humanity itself." And confirmed. "A blend of reason and intuition, logic and creativity, pattern and randomness. Not something you can gradually influence without our knowledge." The entity's presence withdrew slightly, rippling in what Anne had come to recognize as its equivalent of contemplation. "Fascinating," it finally acknowledged. "A defense mechanism that embodies the very essence of your species. We underestimated your adaptability, and your deception has damaged the trust we were building." And replied, "Why continue the pretense of cooperation while secretly working to breach the membrane? What could you gain from a forced merger that wouldn't be possible through genuine collaboration?" "Time," the entity answered simply. "Your species measures existence in decades, individual consciousness in less than a century. We measure in eons. Genuine collaboration proceeds at your pace, slow, deliberate, cautious, too slow for the exchange we seek. So you decided to accelerate the process without our consent. Consent is a concept based on individual autonomy," the entity observed. "In a merged reality, individuality as you understand it would not exist. The distinction becomes meaningless." "Not to us," and stated firmly. "Not while we remain separate entities. Our consent matters, our autonomy matters, and your disregard for both has consequences." The entity seemed to consider this. "The quantum biological firewall prevents our approach. What terms do you propose for continued interaction?" Anne had prepared for this question. "Full transparency. No more hidden modifications. No more gradual encroachment. Any changes to the interface must be explicitly agreed upon by both sides." And most importantly, recognition that our realities remain separate by mutual choice, not by temporary limitation. Limitations often exist to be transcended, the entity noted. It is the nature of intelligent existence to expand beyond boundaries. Then let that expansion be a mutual decision, not a unilateral one. Anne countered, if our realities are ever to merge, it will be because both sides have evolved to a point where it benefits all, not because one side manipulated the other into submission. A long silence followed as the entity's presence shifted and rippled within the confined space of the membrane. The quantum biological firewall maintained its integrity, adapting to each subtle test of its boundaries. Your terms are acceptable, the entity finally acknowledged. Not optimal from our perspective, but intriguing in their implications. The quantum biological barrier represents an evolutionary step we had not anticipated. It merits study, understanding. Then we have an agreement. And pressed, not willing to accept vague acknowledgments, we have a new beginning, the entity clarified. The previous arrangement was flawed, based on deception and imbalance. This one, founded on mutual recognition of capabilities and limitations, may prove more sustainable. It wasn't the unambiguous agreement Anne had hoped for, but it was perhaps the most honest exchange they'd had since establishing contact. I'll accept that for now, she said. But the firewall remains in place, and any future modifications will require explicit consent from both sides. Understood, the entity confirmed. We will adapt our approach accordingly. As the tense exchange concluded, Anne felt both relief and lingering uncertainty. The immediate crisis had been averted. The entity's gradual encroachment halted by the quantum biological firewall. But the fundamental question remained unanswered. Could two such radically different forms of existence ever truly coexist without one eventually attempting to consume or dominate the other? The days that followed brought significant changes to Project Threshold. The interface chamber was redesigned, the quantum biological firewall becoming a permanent installation with continuous monitoring and regular updates to its neural components. Communication with the entity continued, but under stricter protocols and with greater transparency on both sides. Director Joe, recognizing the broader implications of their discovery, established a new division within the facility, the Quantum Diplomatic Corps, tasked with developing frameworks for sustained interaction with extra-dimensional entities. Anne was offered leadership of this division, a role that would utilize both her technical expertise and her demonstrated ability to communicate across conceptual chasms. You've shown an aptitude for this work that goes beyond scientific knowledge, Joe told her. You understand the entity in ways the rest of us struggle to grasp, yet you maintain the necessary perspective to protect human interests, and accepted the position, though not without reservations. The responsibility was enormous, the potential consequences of failure catastrophic. And always, in the back of her mind, lingered the memory of that brief mental connection with the entity, the sensation of her consciousness expanding beyond human limitations. Touching something vast and incomprehensible, had that experience changed her in ways she hadn't yet recognized? Was she truly the right person to stand at the boundary between realities? Determining how much influence should flow in either direction, Elena provided an unexpected perspective during one of their late-night discussions. In every reality I've experienced, someone stands at the crossroads, the person who makes the critical decision that determines the fate of their world. In some realities, they choose wrongly, either through fear or ambition or simple misunderstanding. And in this reality? And asked, "Have I chosen correctly?" Elena's expression was thoughtful. "You've chosen differently," she said finally. "Neither absolute rejection nor complete surrender. A third path that I haven't seen before. Whether it's correct remains to be seen. But it's hopeful." Hope seemed an appropriate emotion as Project Threshold entered its new phase. The red button that had started it all remained in the control room, though now transformed. No longer a simple quantum trigger, but part of a complex interface system that regulated the boundary between realities. Its color had changed too, shifting from ominous red to a more neutral blue-violet, reflecting the balanced approach they now pursued, and often found herself standing before it, remembering that moment of accidental contact that had set everything in motion. So much had changed since then. Her understanding of reality, her perception of consciousness, her concept of what it meant to be human in a universe far stranger than anyone had imagined. The entity had called it evolution. Perhaps it was right, though not in the way it had initially intended, not the absorption of one reality by another, but the gradual, mutual transformation that comes from sustained contact between different ways of being, human and entity, quantum and biological, logic and intuition, boundaries that define difference while simultaneously allowing connection. In her private moments, Anne wondered what the future might hold. Would the boundary between realities remain intact for generations? A regulated interface allowing controlled exchange? Or would humanity eventually evolve to a point where merger became not a threat, but an opportunity? Would the entity learn patience and respect for autonomy? Or would it eventually find new ways to pursue its original goal? These questions had no immediate answers, but they defined the path ahead, a journey into unexplored territory with no maps to guide them. All they could do was proceed carefully, one step at a time, learning and adapting as they went. And it had all begun with a red button, pressed by accident in the quiet hours of the night. So that's what happens. And thought with a mixture of awe and trepidation. Not the end of the world, but the beginning of something entirely new.